Hey everybody, and welcome to today's show. Now, today is the first day of the Global Azure 2022 event, and Global Azure is happening over the next 3 days globally. There's tons of sessions happening, both virtual and in person. I think last time I looked at the statistics, we are across 6 different continents with about 443 speakers and about 438 different sessions happening over the next 3 days. So be sure to check out everything that's happening and tune in and see what's happening and get involved with the community. Now, on today's show, we're going to have a bunch of guests. I'm going to be talking to them about various different things, between writing books to creating courses to working remotely and also running community events over the last few years. My first guest is Shabazz. Shabazz, welcome today and thank you for joining me.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. A bit nervous about being on live again, but hey ho. So it's always good to challenge yourself. Shabazz, for anybody that doesn't know you, and I don't believe there'll be anybody that doesn't, but do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure thing. My name's Shabazz. I'm an infrastructure master of a net company based in Leeds, so north of England. I'm a Microsoft MVP in enterprise and mobility. Main areas of focus around Azure Virtual Desktop, some infrastructure as a service in Azure, and just general Microsoft 365 goodness.
Awesome. I do love your job title, Shabazz. That's the best job title ever.
That's the only reason I went for the job, if I'm honest with you.
Awesome. I should say, if anybody's tuning in and wants to ask Shabazz a question, please do hit the comment box wherever you're watching us, and we'll get to those questions. Shabazz, I wanted to pick your brains today about some of the activities you've been working over the last few years, because you've been quite busy. You've wrote 2 books and you've done an online course recently. Is that right?
Yeah. Since I've become my first year as an Microsoft MVP, so it's brought more attention probably to my sort of public profile. The 2 books, I suppose, were the first where it all kind of started. So it started off, I did a collaboration with another MVP called Victor Hedberg. So he's based in Sweden. It's a great story how we first kind of got speaking about it, and we got introduced through a mutual friend of ours, Simon Binder, who you might know, again, MVP. Yep. And he just put us in touch because I got approached about writing a book on information protection in Microsoft 365. And we just kind of hit it off straight away, and yeah, it was good. My first book, having it as a collaboration, co-authoring it, it's difficult, and having someone there to feel my pain and just to bounce ideas off was great. And you know what, it was a really fun experience. And the second book was simultaneous, if I'm honest with you. I was writing them at the same time, which in hindsight I do kind of regret, because it was a lot of work and pressure. But that was around Azure Virtual Desktop, so the subject matter I was a lot more comfortable with. And as far as writing that book, from a content perspective, I enjoyed it much more because it's a subject very close to my heart. So yeah, that was that. And yeah, they both kind of came out within a week of each other. Nice. It's some on my bucket list, if I'm honest with you, that I've always wanted to do. I didn't do it for for money or anything like that. It was just something I really wanted to have on as something I've been able to do. And very happy to have done them both.
Awesome. So were you approached by a publishing company or someone who writes books to write that book, or did you go out and search for that opportunity?
No, again, I've been very fortunate, very fortunate that I just got approached. And I think the main reason that happens is because of stuff that I post myself. So on my Twitter and LinkedIn, I would post blogs or videos that I've done off my own YouTube, my own blog site. And people share those, and then someone stumbles across your profile and think, oh, wow, you know what, it might be good to write a book on this topic. So yeah, I was approached through LinkedIn from the publisher themselves, and they approached me about writing the book. And I was very nervous about doing something like that on the first time on my own, which is why I approached Victor, and that's how that kind of got co-authorship started.
So when you were approached and you said yes, you were going to do that, how did you start to think about the structure of the book? Were you given like chapter headings that you had to write, or was that a blank page and you had to figure out all of that?
It was a blank page, but again, because of the 2 books I wrote are both based on Microsoft certifications, existing Microsoft certifications. So essentially, the template's already there for you, because the exam. If you look at Microsoft's exam site, they have a breakdown of the skill set. Yeah. That's already there. So you essentially you base your books on that. So that makes up the chapters of your book. which is fine because they're based on those exams. So you have to be as accurate as you can be. The sort of content, however, that's where it can become difficult because there's a lot of content out there for exam. Microsoft do obviously their own content, and other people do their own content. It's got to be unique. So the sort of message you're trying to get across, you've got to put into your own words, and that was a challenge. But again, it makes it feel more personal. Like they're my words, they're Victor's words, and that's kind of what makes it feel very special, I think.
So how did it work with you and Victor? Because you said he was based in Sweden and you're obviously here in the UK, and with the pandemic and everything, I imagine you guys haven't been able to sit down in the same room. Did you have like regular chats, or how did you work?
Yeah, so we have it, and we still have it to this day, really. We have a regular Thursday call, and because, again, you build a special relationship when you're going through something like that. We've become very good friends. We were fortunate enough to meet each other at the South Coast Summit.
Okay.
Was it towards the end of last year? But obviously the book was done before then. But yeah, we had a regular Teams call basically every week, and we'd be on WhatsApp chatting about stuff as well. And it was great because, we were able to review each other's chapters, and give each other pointers. And like I said, even after the book now, we're still having that regular Teams meeting because, we're very good friends now. And, we just talk about stuff just for half an hour.
So how long did it take you to write the book? I know you said you were writing 2 at the same time, but how long do you reckon it took you? Was it like 6 months? Was it a week? Like what was like?
Yeah, so with the co-authorship one, because we split the chapters halfway, so there were 12 chapters, we did 6 each. You were given deadlines, so you have to meet a specific deadline, and you agree that beforehand. So it's not like they say to you, "This is our deadline. You have to stick to it." They say, "Right, how do these timeframes, sit with you?" And it is about a 6-month process essentially, because you obviously have to do the initial draft, and there's about 2 editorial processes where you have to go through, and then it's such a long process. It's quite an eye-opener actually, especially if you're using images. They have to make sure the images are the right resolution, and when they print, they look right. And there's a lot of stuff like that goes on. So end to end, it was about a 6 to 8 month process from us starting the book and it being published.
Wow, that's a lot of time commitment, I imagine, on top of your job and everything else that you do.
Yeah, it was. It was some long nights. Obviously, because we all have a day job, but it was some very long nights. But like I said, I don't regret it. It was a good experience.
Awesome. In terms of you writing the content, Shabazz, I know you know your stuff, but was there any kind of fact checking from Microsoft, given that you were writing about their technology and towards an exam? Was there any kind of
So no, not from Microsoft. There's a reviewer. So obviously myself and Victor, for example, were checking each other's work, but we had a third person who, again, I think Victor knew him, but I didn't know him before then. The third part person basically that reviews it, and they're very impartial and come back and critique your work, which is. I'm fine with it. I don't have an issue with people. I'm human. I'm very open to, I'm going to make mistakes. And it's again, my first book, I'm learning. You've got to be able to take criticism, I think, when you're writing a book. Even if you are, a Microsoft MVP in it and you're a specialist, whatever, you have to be able to take critique. And, it's always put forward in the right way as well. There's never, in my experience, even in the 2 books I've written, there's never been any sort of a negative sort of comment that's been made. You know what I mean? It's always productive and it's there to help. So as long as you can take criticism, you're fine. But there was no cross-checking from Microsoft at all.
Yeah. Cool. So see your 2 books, were they both with the same publisher, or was it different publishers that you worked with?
Yeah, so it's, again, quite lucky. I had 2 separate publishers, which was again, and they were very different experiences as well, which was interesting. So, Pact were the first. Pact, I think a lot of people have done books with them. People who've written books, sorry, they were the first publisher for the collaboration with Victor, which was the SCE 400 book, and they were very hands-on. They had a full team of people that were and. Again, it was a different experience, sometimes a bit micromanagement, but that's how they do it. And it was difficult at times, but again, good experience, and they're very professional. The one with A-Press was the second one. They were very hands-off. They just said, right, here, so these are your chapters. You've got 6 months to write them, or however many months. This is your final deadline. As and when you do a chapter, just send them in and we'll review them. Okay. So I was left alone. And I was like, And I kind of had to check in with them, and I'm still doing this book. I went, yeah, just let us know when you've done a chapter.
Oh, wow.
So, okay, so it's I had to manage my own time very well. Whereas with Pact, they were very much like any update on your chapter, kind of thing.
So
very different.
Was there one you preferred? Did you prefer one or the other, or did they help each other, do you think?
Again, I think with my first book, it was good. They were very hands-on. I needed that. I don't think I'd have understood how to manage my time. And I think, so they weren't exactly at the same time. They overlapped each other. So I was coming towards like the end of my SC400 collaboration with Victor when the AZ140 Azure Virtual Desktop book started. And I think the experience and the way Pact were very hands-on, and it helped me come up with almost like a process, and I was able to better manage my time. So I think if I'd done it the way around, I would have struggled, if I'm honest with you. So I think the Pact experience was very good. It prepared me to write a book on my own, if I'm honest with you.
Good. That's good to hear. So have you got any other books in the pipeline, or is that you done? Is that item ticked off the bucket list?
I think that's my item ticked off the bucket list. Like I said, it's a very different type of content. It's very different type of content. It's one that I'm so happy I did. I mean, again, some people write like multiple books and 8-9 books, but I've done it. I'm happy I've done it. I can, in however long years' time my grandkids are in around, I can show them it. I wrote this. But, no more books for me, I don't think, in the near future anyway.
Awesome. So I also said that you created an online course, which again, I think was about virtual desktop, wasn't it?
Yeah. So again, just through the sort of community stuff that I do and post on LinkedIn and Twitter, a company called Cloud Academy contacted me, and again they just spoke. It was almost like an interview, really. They'd seen my YouTube content and my blogs, and they said, we think you'd be a good fit to create this content. We did like a trial one. So again, it was the AZ140 exam course essentially. So they're a lot like Pluralsight courses and LinkedIn courses, I suppose.
Yeah.
And just again, it went really well. And just since then, I've been doing multiple courses. I think I'm on my 6th or 7th course for them. It's gone really well, and I really enjoy it. I do enjoy the sort of video content, obviously through my YouTube stuff as well. And I do. It's a good way of expressing myself. I do enjoy it.
It's a very different medium, though, writing like your books, because you can be sitting there just in the zone, whereas video content, you have to be energetic, or at least be in that mood of creating that video content and have more of a visual aspect to it. Did you find that good to transition? Or like, I know you have your YouTube channel, but what was your experience transitioning from that written medium to the visual medium?
So I find video content more artistic, if I'm honest with you, a bit of an art form, whereas writing a book is very much like a blog. You have to be focused, and you do have to be in the zone, literally, like totally shut yourself off, no distractions, because if it's such a different process. And with video content, like I said, you can be a bit more expressive and a bit more artistic with it. So that's why I probably enjoy and take more pleasure out of video content than I do like writing a blog or a book, for example.
So during your video course, did you have to edit your videos? Because I know that's sometimes the hardest bit, listening back to yourself and then critiquing yourself and stuff like that. How did that editing process work for you?
So you have to edit them. So you do like a slide deck, and have your template you have to follow, and again, it's based on the Microsoft exam, so you follow the same sort of exam skills matrix that they have on their website. And it's very different because the short videos, so on like one in a module, one lecture might be a couple of minutes. Okay. So you have to be careful you don't go into too much detail. And plus, because I'm not on screen, my face isn't on screen, but you can hear my voice. It's like animations on the screen. Mm-hmm. So I have to make sure that what I'm saying fits the timing of the animation. So it's a bit of a process getting that done. And like the amount of times it's so funny, the amount of times that I've been recording, and one of my kids, I'll be like, literally nearly finished a section. One of my kids will scream in the background. That's a video ruined. I have to re-record it. It's funny. It's life. We're doing it at home, but that's always a frustration.
I know. I suppose that's maybe the downside of doing video content, where like if someone outside has got their lawnmower going or your kids are in the background, whereas if you're writing the book, those noises don't necessarily affect the end product. They might distract you, but they won't affect the actual like written content.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's one time I remember, and it was doing a Cloud Academy course. That it was really windy outside, and my mic was just picking up the wind hitting my window, and I just couldn't record. It's like one whole night wasted, and I had to say to the Cloud Academy, say, look, I couldn't record anything last night. I'm going to be a bit late this week because of the wind. But like I said, it's just a downside of doing video content.
Yeah, it's a learning experience, I suppose, and again, your time management being on point with that, because you never know what's going to stop you potentially doing something, and you need to be aware of all of that, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. Again, just learning from it, really. Again, I've learned to manage my time quite well now. I have like a set time where family time is very important to me and you, I'm sure, and I make sure that when I get back from work, or if I'm working at home, I have a set time with my family. And then when they're in bed with my kids, that's kind of where. So I'll be up until 1 a.m. sometimes doing what I need to. But I really enjoy it, and as do you, I'm sure. And we, when we enjoy something, we're going to do it more.
Yeah, absolutely. What would your advice be to anybody that wanted to write a book or do a course? Is there anything you've learned after doing the process that you'd love to share with others?
I suppose so. I think I've got my own unique style of how I present my content, and I think that's very important because having your own unique style makes you stand out from everyone. So even like my sort of the way I wrote my book was very different. The way it was very lab heavy because I felt like that. So again, I go by my own experience. I'm reading a book. If I'm just reading text after text after text, I don't engage with it. Yeah. So I try to make it lab heavy. So just think of a writing style that you feel you would be interested in. What would you read? As in who's writing? What would I read? What would I want to read? And that's how I wrote my book. And again, with my video content, I just try and again have a unique style of my own. And again, it's mine. Do you know what I mean? I've created it. I know it's Cloud Academy is all the company you're doing it for, but it's my name on it. So I want to make it my own. I don't want to be all similar to someone else's video. Do you know what I mean? The way I got into it was by sharing my content online. Any blogs that I wrote. So power of social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, anything like that. If you do anything like that, just share it, and the opportunities will come.
Yeah, I suppose to a certain degree, you potentially have to already be in that area before you want to run out and write a book or create video content, because there's a certain skill set or enjoyment that you have to do. Do you think so? Or
100%. So I mean, I have been approached about other books on other topics. Like I think they asked me, "Do you want to do a book on DevOps?" Not really. It's not. It's a great topic, I'm sure. Yeah. It's not something that I particularly have an interest in and know much about. Would I be able to blag writing a book? I'm sure, but why would I want to? It's not something that interests me.
Yeah, I think I've had a few people reach out about random topics for books that I have zero knowledge of and don't really want to dive into, because like you say, there's a tight time frame. There's often 6 months, so you having to learn the content and then learn how to write a book, work with it, maybe someone else as well. That's a lot of pressure, I think, putting on yourself. Yeah. I think
it is, Sarah, and I'm at the point of my life and my career where I want to enjoy what I do, and I want to enjoy any content that I create. So it has to be on topics I like. Everything I create is on topics I have a real interest in, and it helps make sure the content's good as well. Otherwise, you can tell if your heart's not in it.
Yeah, you've got to enjoy it. Otherwise, like you say, it doesn't come across to the audience. So yes, stretch yourself and do new things and stuff. But if you don't enjoy it, your audience aren't going to enjoy it ultimately. That's always the benchmark I would go with.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Awesome. So yeah, are there anything else that you're working on, Shabazz, that you want to shout out? Have you got Bradford Cloud User Group coming up, or?
We do. So we've got Azure Virtual Desktop User Group event in could be here all day. I've got Azure Virtual Desktop User Group coming up in London, where we're at Microsoft office in London on the 17th. Awesome. I think it's an in-person event, and I think we had 40 places, and they're all taken up, unfortunately. But we've got some big people from Microsoft and Nerdio speaking at that event. Okay. And yeah, Brad Cook, we're going to be hopefully publishing the event schedule later on early next week, but there's one coming at the end of May. And I've just finished a YouTube series with Shannon Keane, second collaboration with Shannon. I love working with Shannon. It's so much fun. We have such a laugh. That was on like identity and governance. Again, really interesting topic, one I really enjoy. So yeah, that's just some of the stuff I've been doing.
Lots of stuff happening. Well, keep doing what you do, Shabazz. You're a great role model, inspiration to all of us. So thank you for all your hard work. And thank you again today for joining us. I really do appreciate it. If anybody wants to follow Shabazz, his Twitter handle is on his name badge there. So do follow him. He does do lots of great stuff. But yeah, thank you so much, Shabazz, for appearing today.
Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
No worries. So in our next slot today with Global Azure, we're going back up north to Scotland to a friend of mine and a great friend of mine, actually. Gregor Suttie is joining us, and we're going to be talking about his new job. Gregor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
How you doing? You having a good day?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm just recovering from COVID, so if you see me taking a drink, my voice is ready to go. So apologies for that. Yeah, I was worried about today all week about my voice holding up. So hopefully it will last 20 minutes. But yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting to you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, even being unwell. Gregor, if anybody that's watching doesn't know you, could you give us a quick introduction to yourself and tell us about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously my name's Gregor. As you said, I'm from Scotland, so I kind of live about 15 minutes east of Glasgow. I'm an Azure MVP. I am a Microsoft certified trainer, and I work as an Azure architect for a company in the Netherlands called Intercept. I've been doing IT for about 25 years. My background is kind of development, kind of DevOps, data, anything and everything Azure, apart from a couple of things that I don't really do that well, so I try and avoid those topics. But yeah, that's kind of my quick background. Being a dev manager, my last role, and then moved on to be an Azure architect. So I've been doing Azure for the last 4 years. That's a bit about me.
Yeah, and your Azure experience, Gregor, is all self-taught or mostly self-taught, is that right?
Yeah, all self-taught, yeah. So long story short, 4 years ago I was at JP Morgan, kind of doing I don't know what you call a feature factory, just working on sprints every week and kind of getting bored. And they started doing the cloud stuff, but they were building their own cloud. And I thought, right, I need to get into this cloud stuff. This is where everyone's heading. But their team was they were building their own cloud, and I just didn't see that. There wasn't really a Microsoft thing. It was more build your own thing. So I was like, right, I need to get into the cloud. So I started looking at AWS and Azure. And I'm a Microsoft fanboy all my career, so I decided to try and get into Azure. So while I was there, I started doing the Azure exams, and it's just going from there, trying to learn as much as possible. Yeah.
It's been phenomenal. How many exams did you do in a short space of time? Because that's quite a large number.
Yeah, I've done 14 now, I think. I did eight in 6 months or something like that at the start. I was just like obsessed with it.
Honestly, Superman doing that amount.
I was a bit like a sponge. It was weird. I mean, I failed the first 2 exams I sat because I had no idea what I was doing. I tried to just read the blog posts, read the documentation, and then try and sit an exam, which is not recommended, as you probably well know. You kind of just read stuff. You have to get hands-on and try and play with it. So I failed those first 2, and then once I've passed it, that was me. I was off and running. So it's just like a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? I just couldn't stop. I just kept taking the exams and wanting to learn more and more stuff about it. But
I suppose once you're in that kind of cycle of studying and learning, then it's easy just to move on to the next one. It's harder to start than
exactly. Yeah, that's a good point actually. Because I think if I was to do them again, I would really struggle. So I had a really good focus back then. I kind of gave away my Xbox, to believe it or not, and then thought, right, I need to stop playing my Xbox till like 2 a.m. That's kind of what I did. I just played my Xbox constantly. Gave that away, and just decided to do 2 hours a night every night. Like 7 till 9 was my focus period. I've actually just written a blog post or about to on focusing, because I see problems with people like always on Twitter, and like I've started doing that again. But anyway, back to the exams. I was very good at focusing for 2 hours a night, just doing them. And if you spend 2 hours a night for a couple of months, that's quite a lot of hours. So you can pick up an exam and pass it in a month of doing 2 hours a night, I think. So Yeah.
Yeah,
I did get hooked.
I suppose it's very similar to Shabazz's point there about writing books. He was very dedicated to making sure he did an hour or two every night, and much like studying, it's just that time management and figuring out
Yep.
when you can fit it in. Because, like you say, we've all got a spare hour where we could stop watching
Yeah.
TV or Twitter or something and
Yeah, I
dedicate
mean,
it to.
it's hard because everybody wants to watch the TV program and watch the box set series, but you need
Yeah.
to learn to focus, and I need to relearn the focus. I've actually still writing a blog post just now about kind of resetting my focus on other things, because back then I was great at doing it, and now I'm really bad at doing it. I've slipped back into reading Twitter all day long and just not getting anything done. It's easy when you're off ill, but even still,
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I need to get back into learning what I want to learn and doing what I want to do, rather than just sitting reading Twitter all day long. So hopefully we'll reset and get back to being good again.
But that's ultimately where you are now today, because of all that dedication, because of all that self-learning, because you changed job, was it late 2020 and joined Intercept, is that right,
Yeah.
Gregor?
Yep. So I was working for a company in Glasgow as a development manager, and things didn't really work out because we were kind of body shopping people. We were hiring people and then sending them out to customers, which wasn't really what I was kind of sold. So I didn't really want to do that. I want to be a dev manager for a team for that company. So back in 2019, I bumped into Wesley Hackman, who I now work for at Intercept, and we bumped into each other at Ignite, and he said, if you're ever looking for a job in the cloud, give me a shout. So I gave him a shout, and at the start, I think it was February 2000, I had an interview with them and I got offered the job, but then COVID kicked in and I couldn't start because I didn't know what was happening, and I was going to be the first remote employee, and there was all this kind of don't really know what to do. So I eventually started Intercept in September, so it was quite a long wait, but it was really worth it. So yeah,
I didn't realise you were their first remote employee. So everybody else was based in Holland then, and
yes,
you were the
yes,
first.
yeah.
Well, that's
So
quite a step.
yeah, it was quite a step. It's quite interesting to talk about because I did a little bit of homework and asked around, and everyone said if you get the opportunity, grab it with both hands.
Okay.
So that was really good, even from people within Microsoft who had worked with them. Holly Lehman was basically that was the last person I spoke to, and she was like, "If you get the chance, grab it." So I did. So it was very interesting working for a company because I had never worked remote. I had always worked in an office. So working remote was a big change, but working for a Dutch company when I don't speak Dutch was quite interesting as well. That was an interesting one. I still have Google Translate as my kind of favorite page every day. That was really interesting because when I started, like even things like the documentation, the wiki, everything was in Dutch, and I was like, so I thought, right, I'll get the Babbel app on my phone and try and learn it, and I gave up because it's funny how the Scottish say like loch and all these kind of hard to pronounce words, but the Dutch is a different level. So that didn't go too well. I'll probably try again, but yeah, interesting experience.
I know, because I can't remember what event it was, Gregor. You and I were on it with Isadora, and she tried to teach us some Dutch, didn't
Oh
she?
yes,
And that
yes,
was hilarious.
yeah. That's the kind of thing we're up against. Yeah, like that was some of the easy words. Yeah, yeah. It's been the thing that caught me out. I'll tell you a funny story quickly. If I say 2:30, it's actually 1:30 in Holland. I didn't know that. Like 2:30 is actually 1:30.
Yeah.
And the other thing that caught me out was I was doing some work for a housing company, and I was saying 1.500, and it's like that's 1,500, and I didn't know that. The point and the comma, that caught me out, and I was like almost arguing with somebody for like half an hour about some figures. So it's been an interesting learning experience. It's been absolutely brilliant, to be honest. Yeah, really good. We've now got 7 or 8 people in the UK now, so that's
Oh,
pretty
wow.
good. Yeah,
I didn't realise it
really
was
good.
that many.
Yeah.
So you said that was your first remote job, which is a challenge in itself on its own. So how have you dealt with working remotely versus working in an office? Because it's very, very different.
Yeah, I mean, I like to talk to people. I like to chat to people, and kind of, I'm quite good at being that person who glues everybody together and makes the team work. So I found it quite difficult to start with, just because I could see when I was talking to people, they were sitting kind of going like that because they couldn't quite understand. Obviously, I speak very quickly, so I had to slow that down for a start, and then try and explain everything to the max, which was quite interesting. I work with a guy called Ian, and I love working with Ian, but I think at the beginning he couldn't understand a word I was saying, so that was quite interesting. It's been really good. One of the good things about Intercept is Monday, Wednesday, Friday we have a drop-in cafe where for the last hour of the day you can drop in and chat to people. So that was
Okay.
really good about getting to. I mean, everybody at the start, because I was the first international employee, they all came on, so I got to speak to everyone and kind of just even non-work stuff, just get to know everybody, which was great. So it's been a challenge, but I love it. And I don't think I could go back to working in an office ever again, to be honest with you.
I know, it's very strange, isn't
I
it?
think it'd be weird.
I've been working from this room for 4 years now, and I don't know if I'd be able to go back to being in an office.
Although I did recently, about a month ago, I did go over and meet everyone, which was brilliant, and that was in the office, and that was great.
Yep.
But it was interesting because I think because I was there and they were all talking to me and I was talking to them, we didn't get any work done that whole week because it was just chatting. So there's definitely pros and cons, but I think I would prefer to stay remote.
Yeah. So what things have you and the team been doing while you've been remote? Like you said, you've had your kind of drop-in cafes, but do you have like coffee chats one-on-one with people? Do you have a big team conversation? Like what's worked for you to help build
So
that?
the drop-in chat thing was really great to begin with, but I also set up one-to-ones with nearly everybody when I first joined, because that was good, because I wanted to know, like, what do the salespeople do and who do they speak to, what kind of wanted to know about what everyone did, which was great because they got to speak to me and I got to speak to them, so we just pick each other's brains and kind of get to know each other. So that was really good. That and daily stand-ups and project stand-ups and just speaking to HR and things like that. It's just been really, really good. But yeah, I mean, they're super nice people, the Dutch. I didn't realise how nice they were. I must say that they really are spot on folk. I would highly recommend working for a Dutch company to anyone.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're really good people.
I suppose the time difference is only 1 hour,
1 hour,
is it?
1 hour.
1 hour,
Yeah,
so it's not too much of a...
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, I mean, when I worked at JP with teams in America and India, and that was quite tricky. I know you've obviously worked at Microsoft with people and even larger, and that must have been even harder. Yeah, that time zones are hard. They really are. Even now, still people ask me, is that, like, when they book a meeting, is that 3 your time or 2 your time? Because they always forget I'm an hour behind. An hour's not too bad.
Yeah, an hour's manageable. I think I work for an Australian-based company in Scotland, and there's a massive overlap. There's not a massive overlap, so that makes it really hard for us to cut. Yeah, and I think working for a Dutch company would probably be easier, but hey ho, gotta love the challenges. So
yeah. What's the hour difference? Is it 11 hours or something?
Yeah, it can vary because there's several different time zones in Australia, and then when we put in daylight savings and stuff like that, it becomes even more complicated and
fun.
Yeah, so it's a massive challenge.
Yeah. Cool.
So you said you had the opportunity to actually meet everybody. Did everybody go and meet everybody in the office, or what was that? Was that just
your trip? So work said, well, but when I first started, they were trying to get me over to begin with, but obviously COVID, I wasn't allowed to go, even though I really wanted to. So everyone remote. So we've actually got people, or we had people in South Africa, but they've all now moved to the Netherlands.
Okay.
We've got a lady in Germany, a guy in Barcelona, and the rest are in the UK. We're all going over the second week of June. But I wanted to go over before that just to meet everybody and have a chance to kind of ask some questions and get to know everybody a little bit. So myself and Simon, because we've never got any family ties, we just went over about, I think I can't remember when it was, but 3 or 4 weeks ago. And that was really good, really, really good. So we basically got picked up and spoiled. We got looked after and then taken out every night and doing lots of cool stuff. And it's just great being in the office, because I'd seen obviously the office from people's cameras on Teams and things like that, and then it's finally there, and it was really good to meet everybody. And everybody came in, which was good, because a lot of people still work from home and they're all over the Netherlands, so not everybody lives near the office. So it was nice that everybody came in and said hello. So that was really good, really good fun.
Did you find the relationship you'd built with people virtually translated to being in person, or was there still that awkward, like,
it's funny. Yeah, it's funny because I speak to a guy called Wim in our team, and he was like, I don't really speak to people that well. I could speak to people in Teams, but when I meet you, I won't be able to say it. And it was fine when we finally met up with him. But for the most part, I think it was just the same, which was good. I people and get to know them quite well anyway, rather than just kind of talk shop all the time.
Yeah.
So no, it was good. It was really good. It's good seeing how things work. It was interesting sitting in the office when they're all speaking Dutch. That was quite funny. I had no idea what was getting said, but it was great, really good fun. Yeah.
So, what would you want to tell anybody else that was thinking about doing a remote job or working for a company not in their country? Is there
I mean,
anything?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I just took a leap of faith. Really, I just thought, right, I'm going to try this. I didn't really think about a lot of things when I first started, and it was lucky. I was just lucky that I bumped in a really
Yeah.
good company. The people are great. Everything was great. I would recommend it. I would definitely do it again. There's not a single downside. When I say I didn't think about things like pensions and
Yeah.
and there's all different rules and different because they're a Dutch company and they didn't have anything in the UK. They had to set up an office and do all that kind of stuff. But we ironed all that out with HR, which was really straightforward, which was really easily done as well. So it was great. It was just stuff I hadn't even thought about. They do this thing in the Netherlands called a holiday pay, where they take something like 8% off your annual salary,
Okay.
your monthly salary, and then you get it at the end of May in one lump sum. I didn't know that. So it's things like that. But apparently they do that, and it's for your holidays in June and July. They give you like a lump
Oh,
sum at the
wow.
end of May. It's actually a great idea. I was thinking at the time, not sure about that, but
Yeah.
it is actually a really good idea. You don't miss it, and then all of a sudden you get a lump payment just before June and July. So
On your summer holidays.
it's a good idea, it really is.
That's quite good, actually. That's a really
Yeah,
good idea.
the other interesting thing that I didn't know is when I first started in June and July, that everyone goes off for 3 weeks. So there was loads of folk off for 3 weeks, and then they would come back, and then more folk would go off. So it's a big thing
Yeah.
in June and July that actually everyone goes off for 3 weeks. So that took a bit of getting used to because it was really quiet when that came. Because before that, I had been rammed, and then all of a sudden it was dead, and I was like, this is kind of up and down. But when it was up, it was really up, and then when it was down, it was really quiet. So I'm hoping, looking forward to being quiet in June and July because we've kind of been rammed.
One question I did want to ask you, are most of your customers then based in European countries or Holland and things like that? Yeah.
Yeah, so we've just hired a Nordics sales lady. We've got a lady in Germany, and we've got a guy in the Netherlands. Most of the work's in the Netherlands, but we've got customers starting to spread out, and we're looking to try and hire a salesperson in the UK. So hopefully we're going to branch out here as well. So yeah, most of Europe.
So I suppose in a sense, COVID has maybe helped change the way you worked, because I imagine you would have been traveling quite a bit had COVID not actually.
Yeah, COVID stopped me from having to go to customers, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I quite like meeting customers. Some customers still today want to meet you face to face, which is a little bit tricky. But now that COVID's kind of, unofficially gone everywhere with the governments, you probably can go back to that. But yeah, I do like going to see customers, so hopefully we can do that.
Yeah.
And a big part of one of the reasons why I wanted to join Intercept is we do workshops all around the Microsoft offices in the in Europe. So hopefully we'll get back to doing that as well. So it's always good fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of missing the traveling myself a little bit. I don't miss it all the time because but it would be nice to be able to travel occasionally again and tick off some places as well. So yeah. Awesome. So what's in the future then, Gregor? You said workshops. Have you got any workshops in the future or virtual
I
things?
just missed going to Sweden. Yeah, we're supposed to have one in Sweden, I think. It's either yesterday or today, I think. Hopefully more and more workshops coming up. We do workshops for 4 or 5 different parts of Azure, so hopefully we'll be expanding on that. And getting people like Carol and things like that to do them as well. So it's good fun. It's a couple of days out of the office away teaching people how to learn Azure and asking and helping customers. So I love all that kind of stuff. Should be good. Yeah.
Brilliant. So yeah, is it any last words you want to give anybody, any advice before we wrap up? And
good question. Advice. No, I think I just need to learn like a few other people that I'm speaking to. The amount of focus I need to just rededicate focus and stop reading Twitter for 4 hours a day and get back to doing some real work. So,
I know. I suppose our boundaries have all changed since being working at home, haven't they? And that those time slots have kind of moved around. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story, Gregor. It's been really
Yeah, no
insightful hearing about the things that have been successful for you in your remote job, and good luck in the future. Thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
So we're going to go to our third guest, and we have Wim joining us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Wim. Hello, how you doing?
Hi, Sarah. How are you doing?
Yeah,
and now
I'm good,
you're in Belgium, so next to where Gregor's company is located. So we can do it in Dutch if you want.
I don't know if I'd be able to understand you, but I'll try.
Yeah, maybe Greg will understand some words, but
I do admit I have been learning a bit of Swedish, but I don't think I could learn.
It's almost the same. Some words sound familiar if you do it if you speak them in Dutch, but yeah, it's still something different.
So thank you.
Sorry.
So thank you for joining us, Wim. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience first and tell them a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so for the people who don't know me, I'm Wim Matthijssen. I'm located in Belgium. It's a small country between the Netherlands and France. In my daily job, I work as an Azure technical advisor. So I give all kind of advice on different Azure-related projects. My co-workers are working on. I also deliver workshops and trainings. I'm also an Azure MVP, and I run a user group with some friends of mine. So that's awesome. Me in a nutshell, I think.
I don't know about you, but I'm always terrible at introducing myself. I never know what to say and what not to say.
It depends. If you're doing a talk, it comes automatically, I think. But it's sometimes it's strange to do it because you think most people will probably already see me on some socials, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or whatever. So, but it's sometimes difficult. It depends.
So I think I want to chat to you about communities and running communities, because I think that's how we connected first. Wim, I think when we both became aware of each other in the community and running the various different events. And you said your run, now let me get this correct, because you guys have an awesome name. It's the Microsoft Cloud and Client Management Community. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, and it's MC2MC, and that's why the 2 is in the middle. So it was something Peter the Tender came up on. So quite a spectacular name, quite a long name if you pronounce it, but the short name is quite good, to be honest. Yeah. So when I started off with the community in the beginning, I was a member of another community, more focusing on System Center and Hyper-V. But I evolved and changed into Azure, and that's why I started talking with some other people. And I think it was when we went the last time to Ignite in Florida. I think you even did a talk over there. I think it was the last live one. We started chatting and thinking about maybe we need to start up a new community in Belgium, focusing on the combination of Microsoft 365 and Azure. Because most user groups mostly focus on just one topic. So you have the Azure user groups focusing on the DevOps part, you have AKS user groups, and so on and so on. But we wanted to bring two parts together that were quite integrated with each other. And then we started off, I think it was right before COVID. We had our first in-person event at the Microsoft offices in Belgium, in Brussels. So I think it was around February 20. So COVID was already in China, and it was spreading in the world. So we just went live. We had a lot of people. I think it was around 100 even. Wow. So it was quite nice. And then a month later, everything dropped. And there we were. Stopped organizing in-person events. So our idea was to start off with 3 monthly in-person events at different locations in Belgium, so that everybody had the opportunity. Not everybody can drive from one side. Belgium is not that big, but we have a lot of traffic, to be honest, and a lot of traffic jams. So and I'm pinpointed, but with COVID situation, we had to change and rethink it quite quickly. So
So have you mostly been running virtual events, or have you stopped running your user group during the pandemic? What's been the situation for you?
when COVID hit, we were thinking what were we going to do, and then somebody came up, like most user groups, maybe we start off with doing some virtual events, but the first thing was, how are we going to organize it? Are we going to use Teams? Are we going to use StreamYard like this? Are we going to use Zoom or whatever? And because we're Microsoft user group, we're focusing on Teams. But we started off, I think our first virtual event was in March or April 20, I think. And we used Teams Live, but for us, we found the interaction. There's no interaction with the speakers and with people attending. So I think the month later, we already switched to a normal Teams event. And then, to be honest, everybody is quite controlled not to unmute themselves when people are speaking. And so we started off with monthly events doing on Teams on, I think it's the third Thursday of every month.
Okay.
Then changing topics, and most of the times we had 2 people speaking around Microsoft 365 related topics, and then 2 people focusing on Azure, whatever they wanted to talk about in Azure. So then we had a mix, and people seems to like it because our attendees are going worldwide these days, and we have also a lot of speakers from that's the easy thing with doing it online. You can invite whoever you want to invite, or people can list on our CFP page, and then we choose the speakers. But it's for us, it's not that difficult to find someone to speak at our user group, to be honest. In the beginning, it was difficult, but now, it's we're filled up. We can do it for a few more years, but we hope we can do it in person again rather quickly. We need to find some combination doing it maybe in a hybrid setup, because I see some user groups doing the combination. But you need to have a location with all the equipment, and are you going to invite the speakers to come over to the location, or some speakers doing it remotely if they're from a country far away, for example. So it depends, and I think we still need to think how we're going to handle it.
Yeah, I think you've touched on quite a few points there. So if we go back to when running the virtual events, it's been fantastic being able to attend them, even just as an attendee myself, jump on a stream and join in that user group, or like you say, get speakers from all around the world, because I've had the opportunity to speak at like user groups in New Zealand, which I probably wouldn't have been able to allow or fly 24 hours to speak for 45 minutes. Just So it's been great that way. Albeit it's been massively stressful, I think, obviously, because there's a pandemic going on and other things, but it's been fantastic to have that kind of opportunity. I think, like you said, you've found tons of speakers and you've grown that audience. Has, with the going internationally outside of just Belgium people, have you had more interaction in your meetups, or has it still been very quiet, or how's that been for you?
It depends. It seems some people, even if they're in a virtual situation, they're sometimes shy to open or to mute, and most questions come from the chat, and we try to pick them up, and then we try to ask the person asking the question to unmute and ask the question. But it depends. But mostly we have around 40 people, I think. But the thing, we asked the speakers also if you're able to record it, and we place them all on our YouTube. But with the situation changing, it's starting to get difficult because speakers are prepping for in-person events, and then some bigger events don't want those sessions to be recorded, so they don't bring the session 2 months before the event or something. So that's another situation we're coming into. So it's difficult, but most of the time the interaction is quite okay. Mostly we unmute after the speaker has done speaking, and then if we pick up some questions in the chat, we ask them themselves if people don't want to ask it or don't want to mute. But
yeah, I think for me at least the interaction part of the user groups is probably the most valuable. Yes, I love to hear people come and speak, and I've heard fantastic topics and things like that, but those after chats over a beer and a slice of pizza and making those connections and just sharing the fun stories of what your day's been like or whatever with each other, those are the bits that I love, and I wish we could find a way of translating that more in the virtual world, because I don't think anybody has the right answer to be able to have that collaboration. I know we've got things like breakout rooms inside Teams and things like that, but that feels very forced a little bit.
It's strange. We also have something after the speakers have gone. We have something, bring your own drinks, go to your fridge, pick up your drink and have a chat. But it depends. Sometimes some people hang around, you were chatting and talking for an hour, 2 hours, but sometimes everybody drops out because we also do 4 sessions, so it's quite some time. It's quite long, 4 to 5 sessions, so it depends. But like you said, with the in-person events and especially with the user groups, so you have the interaction, you have the drinks, and people are less shy to ask your question. They don't need to ask it in public, but they can go to the speaker and ask their question directly. And that's, for some people, it seems to be easier, I think. So let's hope we can start kicking off those in-person events again.
Absolutely. So you said you were hoping to go back to in-person. Is that something you've got planned right now, or is that something that's still...
It's a surprise. Normally we will have something.
That's okay.
We're planning something for in June, so it's in the works.
So like you said as well, though, it's figuring out whether you go back to just being in person and just go back to the old way of doing user groups, or whether you figure out how to put a camera and microphones and stream it and have that kind of interaction. Have you thought about the logistics of doing that at all, Wim? Or
I think if COVID stays away, let's hope. Normally we will do something in live or in a hybrid setup every 3 months, and then maybe in between we can still do something virtually, and we can invite the speakers who are not able to come to Belgium, because we're still a user group. We can't fly in everybody because that costs some money. If we have some sponsor first, if you maybe want to plan, we're also thinking maybe of planning a day event, and that's something else. Then probably you need to look for sponsors, but that's a complete other setup and a complete other planning, and there are a lot more things you need to think about, to be honest. So setting up something virtually is then quite easy to I think so.
Here in Glasgow, and the user group I run with Gregor, we did an event last month, a few weeks ago, and we just had a few people in to get the feeling of how do we organise an in-person event again, and we're doing one in June, and trying to figure out the logistics of, if my speaker's remote, can the TV or projector give enough sound, and then how do we interact with them? How does the speaker see the audience? How does the audience ask questions? There's lots of logistics around figuring that out. It's really easy here because I've got my camera and it's all set up, right? And it's like, does the venue have good Wi-Fi? If not, does it have Ethernet? And then I think from my point of view as an organizer, there's quite a lot of effort that would go into doing those hybrid events, and it's whether there's any benefit necessarily to the user, the community, doing it that way or not. I don't know if you guys have had the same thoughts around it, or have I overthought it, Wim?
The thing is, I think if you do it hybrid and you're still a user group, so I think people don't need to pay for their ticket. Even if they need to pay for the ticket, probably their work is paying for the ticket or something. I think people are, I will subscribe and I will come, and then you organize something at a sponsored place or something, and then just 20 or 30 people come up, and you were planned to have around 50-60 people. Yeah, we need to see how it's going to work, and if people, it's a switch for everybody. Everybody was used of sitting in their house for 2 years almost, so I think not everybody come out that easy, and especially if it's in the evening, because user groups mostly are after work, and we'll see when we organize something for the first time. And to be honest, I'm quite surprised also, because on Saturday I also do a talk for a German user group, also for a Global Azure, and they're doing the hybrid setup.
Okay.
So German speaking people are going over there, and I think Carlo and myself will do it from our home office.
Yeah.
So I'm quite curious how that's going to work. Are people able to pick up a mic and ask a question directly? And do we see them projected somewhere on our side? Yeah.
Yep.
We'll see. So I have the same questions, but I think we just need to go with it, test it out, and see whatever best works, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So running the user group, I found that I've had to learn random things like how to create graphics and create banners and weird, strange things like that. Wim, what strange skills have you had to learn running a user group, do you think?
So creating slide decks, creating pictures with the speakers on there, all those things. How do we need to get something like a virtual ticket so people can accept? But how do we need to do it? Some use Meetup, we use Eventbrite. So it's all those things. Setting up the website, see that everything interacts with the website. So the Eventbrite is on the page, the tickets come in, we have a mail flow behind it. And luckily we're a mix of people with different skill sets, and that kind of really helps. And nice thing is somebody new joined our board some months ago, and he's more into the Power Platform, so probably he will learn on some tips and tricks around that also. So maybe we can automate some things in a more easier and more sufficient way than we're doing it now.
Awesome. Sounds really good. I definitely do have to look at automating a bit more of what we do, because there's a lot of manual work for sure.
A lot of work,
For anybody thinking about starting a user group, because I imagine people being able to actually have in-person ones may spark a whole new version of user groups again, or new generation. What tips would you give them to starting a user group?
You really need to love doing it, because just like with Gregor is studying and Shabazz writing books, if you don't like and don't want to spend the time to organize those things, just don't do it, because it will take up some time of your family time and hobby time. And for me, I really like doing it, enjoying it, and also the speaking. I love it, but I don't think it's for everybody. It's easy starting up, but keeping the pace going, that's something different, I think. And if you then really are not into it, probably your user group will go away quite rather quick, I think. And you also need to get your own audience and your own community around it. So don't start up a user group if there's already an Azure user group number 50 in your country, for example, because probably that won't work.
Yep. And I think as well, ask for help, ask friends, ask colleagues to help you, because I think, is there 3 or 4 of you that run the user group? Is that right?
We're with 9 already, I
9.
think. And even 2 people working at Microsoft. So Peter the Tender does really help us. We have Ken, we have Team Hermie, we have Team de Keurklarer, Frank has joined us. We also have Micha, myself, Jasper, and another Peter also. So we're with quite a big bunch.
Yeah, having that team to spread out the different tasks and help definitely does help.
We try to, but for 1 month it works better for some of us, and the other month it works. But the flow goes on, and there's always somebody that can pick up a role if needed. And we have, I think this evening, even after I have another session after this. This evening we have a call, a monthly call, and then we plan our, for now it's still an online one.
Awesome.
With a focus on Belgium speakers, if I'm still correct. Yeah, it was on Belgium speakers. So yeah.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Wim, for joining me today and sharing your insights into running a user group community. Here's hoping we all get back to in person and figure out how to run them in person again. Please do check out the community if you're over there in Belgium or anywhere in the world. And yeah, thank you so much, Wim, for your time.
Yep, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Oh. So that ends the portion of our interview section for today at Global Azure. However, we have a fantastic speaker coming up who's going to be telling us about security. Now, I see him in the background. Carol, welcome to today's session.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So do you want to quickly introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. Love to. As we've gotten used to all of these virtual name tags nowadays, but still my name is Carl. I've been one of the global organizers before, and very happy to be here this time as a speaker as well. I'm an MVP and RD, and I work a lot with enterprise customers, and specifically on cloud securing their cloud transformation. So it can be a very small thing, kind of auditing a specific kind of crown jewel type of application, or something kind of multi-year, larger term transformation and ramping up kind of teams of people working in securing software that's already being deployed to the cloud and making sure that we do that in a scalable way as well.
Excellent. So today's session, Azure security, is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So this is kind of my favorite type of session. It's very ranty. So basically it's me yelling at cloud and how to do it wrong for as long as you'll let me.
Excellent. Well, I'll disappear and let you take over, and good luck and have some fun with the session.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. All right. Excellent. I see my screen is up here. So let's switch over to my main screen. Excellent. As I mentioned, this is really my favorite type of a session format, and one of my favorite sessions within that format as well. So expect a lot of ranting, expect a lot of war stories. If it's a very physical in-person event, expect a lot of speaking over people and so forth. But I'll try to mimic a lot of that and bring some of those experiences from presenting this in a two-way audience as well. So the session really is about top pitfalls of Microsoft Azure security and crucially how to avoid them. I mentioned I'm Carl. I'm working at a company called EPAM Systems. I'm working there as a cloud security head, leading our European practice there. A lot of acronyms for a lot of different organizations within the context of wearing this particular hat. I'm an MVP and RD as well as a CISSP. And for my pandemic project, I wrote a book by APRES called Azure Security Handbook. Feel free to check that one out as well. With that, let's get started. So basically, kind of no show of hands in this type of format, but it's actually quite a common misconception that I like to a myth that I like to bust as well, is that actually based on a lot of research, misconfigurations of cloud services are actually the top reason for an attacker to gain entrance. It's not a fancy 0-day or something that you'll read from the top page of your RSS reader or Twitter or whatever you're following your news from. It's really misconfiguration of public cloud services. This is a statistic from Verizon's data breach report that they put out yearly. And as a consultant, of course, I like to refer to Gartner as well. So even Gartner refers to this. Nearly all successful attacks are because of a cloud misconfiguration. And this is already a couple of years old, this one, crucially, and they mentioned here about customer misconfiguration. But I'd like to point out that, as we've seen recently in the past couple of months and couple of years, actually it's also about cloud misconfiguration of the cloud service providers themselves. And while it's sort of similar to 0 days, in those cases, it's a little bit more crucial to look at understanding how us as customers are using the cloud. How are we reacting to that? Do we understand what is our part of that shared piece of responsibility of security? But with that, let's start looking at what are these misconfigurations that I'm calling out. There's of course a ton of those, but I have a few of my favorites that I like to talk about for hours at a time. So let's have a look at those and how we can avoid them. So the first one really is something that we should already be familiar with. So it's really about unprotected public endpoints, be it to websites, be it to management ports, remote access to servers, anything that is kind of exposing us to the public internet from our trusted cloud. And here I have an example, a practical example of that, where I've had 2 virtual machines that I've deployed using the latest patches from the Azure Marketplace gallery of virtual machines. It's just very standard Windows server. I've let them run for 24 hours, and then I'm basically querying the logs of what's happening in those VMs. And crucially, I've let on the default RDP port there, and I've actually kept that open there. So we'll see what's actually going to happen there is that when I'm querying the logs in there from my security events of the Windows event logs, I'm actually seeing, there we go. I'm actually seeing over 3,000 different usernames being attempted. So these are failed login attempts that I'm listing here. So I had over 3,000 users that have attempted to be signed in. And if you look at this, some of these default names like administrator and admin or Swedish administrator, these are all logged in thousands of times. So actual failed login attempts are actually tens or hundreds of thousands, not just these 3,000 over here, which is in itself already quite a massive number. And this is not kind of just for virtual machines. Azure is doing better at defaults. So you need to do a little bit of work in order to open those ports yourself. But if you are looking at, for example, container stuff, basically whenever we have networking, whenever we deploy anything with a network piece into the cloud, we are responsible of hardening that. And here I have just a very simple kind of hello world type of application running in Azure container instances. And I've ran that for just a couple of hours. And there's lots of interesting stuff that's happening in here. As you'll see, there's Nmap scanning over there. There's a little bit of application scanning in there. There's a ton of activity just by having a web endpoint that we are opening up in there. This is just a very simple Nginx demo applications that I have in here. So there is no web application firewall. There is nothing protecting me from body scanning and checking out what's in my environment. All right. So what can we do? Well, we can do a lot of stuff to protect us from these unprotected public IP addresses. Basically, as I mentioned, anytime you have networking, anytime you have a public IP address that you deploy, that means that you manage it. That means that it's a risk, and you should carefully pause and think of what are you doing, and is it worth doing? Maybe grab a cup of coffee and talk to your colleague and think about, is this really necessary? And if it is, then there are a couple of options. If you're working on infrastructure as a service, there's access control list, network security groups. There is Microsoft Defender, just-in-time access, and there is, of course, VPN environments. There are multiple appliances from the VM gallery, and there's Azure Bastion for giving us this access, this administrative access RDP management type of access in a bit more secure way, more managed way. You don't need to go to the most insanely secure or hardened way. Every bit of movement to a little bit more secure way in this perspective is very helpful there. Even if it's just a static IP address filter that you have, that's already just tremendously better than what you have when it's completely unexposed. And the same goes on with platform as a service side. So platform as a service, I kind of split into the compute layer and the data layer. And on the compute layer of the platform as a service, so actually on the data layer of the platform as a service, we can put in place, again, those quote unquote firewalls. We can actually put in place IP address filters. We can put in place service endpoints, which prevents us from being accessed outside of Azure. Again, not perfect, but already covering a lot of ground, already getting us that bit better. Or we can go all in, we can use private endpoints, we can use different, more expensive services and more complex to deploy services in there as well. And that is then true on that compute layer as well. And here I have an example on what could it look like in the platform as a service side on the data layer. So basically here I have just the quote unquote firewall, so the network access list of my storage account. I can put in my IP address ranges that I'm allowing. There is a limit there, so it's not kind of for your biggest teams or for your kind of public usage, but still it's really helpful. You can put in virtual networks there. You can start adding VPN. You can start gradually adding network controls there bit by bit. But if you are using your storage account, for example, to serve publicly accessible content, blobs in your blob storage, for example, you might still need to grant access to some sort of users that you don't know upfront where they're coming from. And that's where these SAS tokens come in. What's relatively new since the product itself was announced way over 10 years ago now, is that now we can actually add, whenever we are creating these SAS tokens, which are basically limited time use or limited time use tokens for us sharing access securely from that storage, we can actually add IP address filtering already within that SAS token creation as well. So that's an additional measure, even though this file itself or blob itself will be publicly accessible. There's that additional bit of granularity for our access control there. So quite beautiful, and something that's a little bit lower impact compared to, for example, enforcing private link throughout everything that you are doing. There we go. And let's move on to the other pitfall that I'm very happy to talk about, because this is something that keeps on getting back. Another thing that we are really supposed to know, that we are not supposed to do this, but yet we are doing this. Basically, wherever I go, any size, any type of customer, any type of project, new or old, big or small, there's always some sort of beautiful broken authorization within that management plane of Azure. So what does it look like? Well, basically, it can look like everyone being an owner, or basically everyone being an owner. And at worst, it can even mean that it's within the subscription scope or some of these very broad scopes. And this can be legacy. This can be something that because the owner is the default role when you're creating your new subscription, when you're just starting out, and then you're basically already kind of taking care of the authorization. You don't need to worry about it. You might not even think about having different type of access. If you're coming from another cloud platform, you might not even have the similar type of concept that is so tightly enforced on this identity and access management side on Azure. So you might not even realize that you're acting in basically what is an equivalent of a super user or a root. And whenever you're then onboarding new users to that same environment, quite often I see the anti-pattern of just giving everyone the same access that the first person had. So kind of the anti-pattern of role-based access control, because if everyone has the same rights, then it's not role-based access control. And what's wrong with that, of course, is the owner can manage user access. They can create, read, update, and delete those assignments. And they can even invite anyone in, and they can create, read, update, and delete any resources within the scope that they are giving in. So if it's an access in the subscription scope, then whenever you're getting any new deployments, someone else creates a virtual machine or a storage account in that same subscription, that same user that's an owner can first of all kick that other user out. They can remove their access, they can invite anyone with an email address in, and they can delete that resource that was just created by someone else. So very, very powerful role. So what should we do? So we should definitely separate the duties of this owner between different built-in roles. These are very small steps that you can do in order to cognitively make that a different habit of working within that role. So the main thing to note is that there is the contributor role, which is a very well-known built-in role that lets you create, read, update, and delete resources. A lot of the things that you need to do that are typically added for an owner, a lot of the things you need to do there can be done as a contributor. So the default, at least the very minimum that you can do, is to move from owner into contributor. But there's still that other part of this pie that you need to worry about, which is about managing user access. And there is such a role called user access administrator. That's a built-in role that's been there for ages, but it just doesn't happen to be in those three built-in roles that's on the top of the big list, where we have owner, reader, and contributor. It's actually down there because it starts with user access administrator with you. That means that it's very down bottom on that list, which is ordered alphabetically. So instead of having that one role that can do both, split those administrative privileges so that you have folks who can do create, read, update, and delete resources, and then you can have folks who can create, read, update, and delete role assignments. That's already a good step of separating those duties, separating those concerns there. But it's not as easy as I made it just sound, because contributor actually can act as de facto authorization or kind of user access administrator for a lot of services. And crucially, a lot of these data plane platform as a service components actually kind of break the role-based access control model. There is a support now for a lot of these to use role-based access control properly, but you need to enforce that yourself. By default, a contributor can actually go ahead and remove a SQL administrator. They can add their new SQL administrator for the whole logical server. They can go ahead and regenerate the account keys, the shared keys of a storage account. So do anything with the data and break all of your integrations and all of your applications that are using kind of static access there. And crucially, a contributor can go ahead and manage access policies within Key Vault. So they can remove anyone having access there. They can again break your integrations, break your pipelines, and crucially, they can get access to their data. That's quite scary, right? Luckily, as I said, we are starting to get proper data plane RBAC coming into these services. And on top of that, we are even starting to get services for preventing to use this legacy authentication as well. Another part of that broken authorization model is the scope part. So I mentioned already earlier that whenever you add a role-based access control assignment, it's there now and forever. And that means that the inheritance rules kick in. If I get my access right now and I just don't do anything about it, and someone else creates in my same subscription that I have access, someone else creates a resource group, and creates services there, I can access that. I can make changes. I can delete that, crucially. So again, minimize your this broad scope assignments. I would rather you have wider privileges in a very small scope, rather than you having medium level privileges within a very wide scope. And yeah, at least against subscriptions, prefer resource group assignment. It doesn't help you on everything. You still have denial of wallet opportunities there, but it still gets you a long way. So really minimize the subscription scope assignments and realize that if you have static role-based access control assignments, then those will be there until you remove them. Those will have to be evaluated whenever you are making any new changes in that environment. All right, let's switch gears. We talk about networking, then we talk about authorization. Let's talk about audit logging then. And the third fail and pitfall that I really see that a lot of projects fall into is missing audit logging altogether. And I don't mean having kind of insufficient level of logging in place, not verbose enough, but I mean really missing audit logs, because most of those services actually don't emit any of those audit logs by default, or if they do, there might be some retention times that are not necessarily enough for you. Azure activity logs, ARM activity logs, for example, are there for 90 days. We have the logs, but only if we get to access them. But crucially, when we are talking about the configuration of services, things that we can't move, like those activity logs within that 90 period of time, we have services that sound very security focused, like a key vault or a web application firewall that you will think will have audit logging enabled. But no, key vault and web application firewall are examples of services that don't actually create any type of data plane or content logs or administrative logs within their quote unquote runtime. You only get the ARM level logs, and you might get some metrics from Azure Monitor, but you don't get to see the detailed activity within those logs. So that is, again, crucial to note that it's not just creation of these services themselves. You need to couple that with creating that, emitting those logs and storing those logs somewhere. That's when you're thinking of this from the kind of infrastructure as code perspective. If you just want to see how this is done on the UI side, it's very simple. Audit logs are enabled by going something into this teeny tiny place called diagnostic settings. Settings, not even diagnostic logs, it's diagnostic settings. And we are going to add something called a diagnostic setting. And that's where we finally actually get our audit events and then also some diagnostics with our metrics. So it's a little bit hidden if you don't actually go ahead and read the docs. If you just want to explore the UI, you might miss this bit. And once you click on that adding of those diagnostic settings or creating those logs, that's where you actually can then select the types of logs that you can create. And this now is different from each type of service that you have. A web application firewall has different types of logs than a key vault, etc., etc. So for all of these, you need to understand what are these logs and which logs do I need to actually listen to. For an Azure App Service, the types of logs even differ by the pricing tier that you are using. So you need to be very careful when creating those logs. It's not just enough that you have a diagnostic setting. You need to check which types of logs you are actually emitting there. And then the part on the right, which is where do you send them? Do you send them to a storage account? Do you integrate through an event hub into whatever you are using as a CM somewhere else? Or do you store them through a Azure Monitor or Log Analytics workspace there? Another topic there, how to mitigate that, will be to add automatic alerts from, I guess, Microsoft Defender for Cloud or Microsoft Defender for X. Not even sure right now what's the branding for this particular feature. But basically, if you enable Microsoft Defender for each of those services, like Microsoft Defender enabled for Key Vault, then you get access to kind of custom alerts or automatic alerts based on actual utilization. So for example, for a storage account, here are some types of alerts that you'll get. You'll get an alert where someone is accessing that from an unusual location, when there's a potential exfiltration of data, maybe something a little bit unusual is happening in there on the actual usage. Definitely recommend looking at this. Even if you don't onboard those into Sentinel and have a ton of people in your organization looking at them, you as kind of, if you're wearing multiple hats in a smaller project, you can already take an advantage of this. And here, I guess, just for convenience sake, I have a different branding name myself here, but here's just an example of what those logs might look like. Here's an example of unusual operation pattern in a Key Vault. This might be something that we might want to have a look at. And all of these logs, these alerts, we can actually take away to that modality that works best for us. We can, for example, take those to the Azure application that you have on your phone, if that's your thing. We can store those outside in our Slack, Teams, whatever we are using. All right. Lastly, I'm going to talk about separately from that authorization piece. I'm going to talk about legacy access keys. There are different types of key-based and other legacy access control methods within Azure services, especially the ones that have been around for a long time, or that are typically used for kind of just fire and forget type of situation. Just give me a connection string and I won't bother you anymore type of approach. Well, a storage account is an example of that. A storage account basically has this access key, this shared key, that if you have access to that key, if you get your hands on that key, you can basically do anything within the data plane. You can create new SAS tokens, you can delete data, you can read data, you can do anything, as I said. So instead, what you should do is, first of all, you should restrict access to this particular Azure Resource Manager call, Microsoft storage accounts list keys. You should prevent or at least monitor access to that. The earlier example that I had was when someone actually performed this action, I'm sending an alert. Well, that's great. What you should do as well is use data plane RBAC roles. You should use, if you're using an application, use service principals or managed site entities and grant data plane roles for that. If you are granting access to people, then you should use, again, role-based data plane roles. And there's now also automatic key rotation that is available for us programmatically for rotating those keys if we really have a legacy system that we can change that needs to use these shared keys or legacy type of authentication. And there's even a neat little radio button that we can actually use that lets us prevent this shared key access, this legacy authentication, specifically for a storage account. And this is a typical example or very nice example of something that can be considered as a misconfiguration. Is this box ticked or not, basically? If it's disabled, if it's enabled, what happens to our environment? Can we actually make this change? We don't know. We need to check some docs, and then there's kind of analysis paralysis in there. What you can do, you can manually go ahead and fix what you currently have. You can make those changes into infrastructure as code, but you might still have some drift. Basically, what happens until next time we come and look at this, if this box is ticked or not. And that's where basically these cloud security posture management tools like Microsoft Defender for Cloud kick in and help us automatically check these using, for example, Azure policies. Other way of looking at this will be to scan periodically, more actively on our side, either the actual runtime or scan the infrastructure as code that we are using, for example, a static application or static security scanning tools made for IAC. But basically, the benefit of this is that instead of needing to dig into the logs that might not even be there for my storage account, when I have this actually enforced in this disabled mode, this means that only people who access my storage account using Azure Active Directory can get in. And that means that I get centralized logging, and that centralized logging is actually within Azure Active Directory signing logs, which means that they are write once, read many type of storage, which means that I can't, as a baddie, go in and delete those types of logs. If it were something else, I could go in and delete the diagnostic setting, for example. So here's just an example of how that would look like from an administrator perspective. You might, if you are not an admin in your Azure Active Directory tenant, you might not even see this type of log. But basically, here's an example where I'm signing into a custom application, and what type of information do I get there? What sort of authentication was used? Was it crucially not just the successful ones, but also the failed attempts that I'm getting here are reported. Very neat, very neat. What else I can do overall with this approach is basically I can take away all of the places where I will typically use creds. I can let my users sign in using Azure Active Directory, B2C or regular Azure AD. I can let my web application use a managed identity to fetch data from, for example, that storage account or my relational database. And my admins can even use their local endpoints to actually work with this through, for example, Storage Explorer, again using Azure Active Directory. So no creds, no legacy authentication needed for any of these type of scenario here. Of course, this only applies when we are building something new, but again, small incremental changes there. Here's an example of how these changes could look like when we are working with infrastructure as code security tools. This is an example of an infrastructure as code tool that can act as a static application security scanning tool, but the same rule set can actually be used. This is from Checo. The same rules that can actually be used here. I'm using it in Visual Studio Code as basically security intelligence, getting into whenever I'm writing my infrastructure as code template, I already get the tooltip saying that I'm doing something wrong. Very neat. I definitely suggest you take a look at tools like this. And then we are about to wrap up and start some Q&A. I have a couple of slides for you to take away. Basically on the tooling side, or kind of how to learn what to do in order to actually do better. There's lots of different materials for building your cloud security framework. There's the kind of cloud agnostic, kind of compliance-driven way of looking at things by Cloud Security Alliance. There's Cloud Control Matrix that was just updated to the version 4 that maps whatever you are doing in, for example, Azure into those industry standard controls and baselines, and that's basically the glue that sticks what you are doing from the technical side into those internal or external auditors. So it's the translation layer between those two worlds. For Azure specifically, there's Azure Security Benchmark and various Azure Security baselines. So the Azure Security Benchmark is the set of policies, the policy initiative that you have on your Azure environment. And Azure Security Baseline is basically a documentation page of security documentation for each Azure service. So there's an Azure Security Baseline documentation set of security best practices for example, storage account or a key vault, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Really recommend looking at this official source from Microsoft. And then for an unofficial one, if you're working with Azure Policy, I recommend looking at AZ Advertiser. Really great web environment for exploring what's within individual Azure policies, what's even doable using Azure policies, and what is the version history, what is within a policy initiative, and so on. really good UI for exploring all of that. I mentioned IAC, infrastructure as code, static scanning. There's lots of examples there. There's paid versions, freemium versions, completely open source tools. Here's just 2 examples. There's Chekhov, there's Tenable, very good solutions that also integrate with your IDE and basically provide this kind of security linting capabilities there as well. And if we're working with containers, the same things apply. I consider a cloud infrastructure that runs Kubernetes, again, prone to misconfigurations. There's you can run Docker scan as part of your builds when you're building your Docker images. You can automate that, and you can use Kube Audit or Kubescape to inspect the security posture of your Kubernetes infrastructure. And then finally, just a shameless plug, self-promotion there again. Check out the book. Still, despite all of the rebranding of the tools, still very relevant. I've also done 2 years ago did a security best practice course for developers in LinkedIn Learning. Please feel free to check out that as well. And with that, I believe I'm ready for some brands and Q&A.
That was really good, Carol. Thank you so much for that session. Lots of interesting gotchas for people to watch out for. I wonder, could you share, without naming any names, the worst customer scenario you've ever seen and what impact it had on them when you discovered it?
Yeah, I mean, the worst ones are most likely the ones that have all of these and multiple places, and when you fix them, it's kind of a whack-a-mole that it keeps on resurfacing. But certainly I think specifically kind of this, let's say, banging my head against the wall type of moments have really come from cases where the understanding of security posture is different from the reality. So that there have been investments in security. For example, there's maybe been even an external kind of pen test, or there has been work produced regarding this. But there's this kind of illusion of security in place, and not necessarily anything's being done in there.
So today's World Password Day. What kind of things would you share around passwords? Because there's differentiating kind of advice from change your password to every 30 days and it has to be 12 characters long with complexness, or now we're more towards the never change your password and have it really complex. Like, what would you say around passwords, Carol, given it's World Password Day?
Yes. Earlier today, I was doing a little bit different focus session regarding not when we are building something new, but when we are dealing with existing IT assets and infrastructure there. And I was looking at this from the perspective of what can you do in a kind of low-hanging fruit perspective right now if you are really scared of what's happening in the world right now and want to get at least some quick improvements right away before you maybe add some of those more complex ones. And just adding MFA adds a ton of it does impact user experience, sure, but it adds basically raises the barrier of entry in a lot of cases. So not just for your administrators, but just adding MFA in place for all of your users. It's very powerful. You might require kind of change management and communications help in there, but that's a good start that you can do right away. And then you can also start implementing, if you are using Azure Active Directory, for example, you can start using stuff like Azure Defender for Identity and whatever these names are now again. But basically, there's lots of threat information that Microsoft incorporates into all of those sign-ins. There's the users at risk information. There's basically additional risk context that you can add for each of those sign-ins. And basically, you can start building conditional access policies you can go very deep. So, for example, you can enforce using Azure Active Directory. You can, first of all, you can lock down, for example, I told you about storage. You can also lock down your Azure SQL, and you can, so that it only uses Azure AD. And then you can add a conditional access policy enforcing, for example, coming from a corporate device, or enforcing MFA, or a ton of additional complexity. But that's kind of a small subspace of everything in there. For everyday users, having MFA in place might be painful at first, but especially if you add a little bit smarter MFA that kind of doesn't prompt you every time, but only when you change, only after a certain period of time, or when you change your location, device, all of that, that's certainly helpful there. And I would rather have MFA than enforce users to an arbitrary kind of password length and rethink a new very complex password every 30 or 90 days. That doesn't really help, and that's not something that is being recommended by industry best practice anymore. But it's kind of seen as something that, hey, now we are raising from 8 characters to 25. Now our exponential improvement on our security posture. That's not really it.
Yeah. So thinking towards some of the resources Microsoft provides for their customers, so things like the Cloud Adoption Framework and the well-architected framework, there's fantastic amounts of information and knowledge sharing in those resources. But I'm sure you've looked at them, Carol, and the sheer amount of information that is often in those resources can be overwhelming. But do you find that those kind of resources help people, or are they too heavy in information for helping people with their cloud implementations?
Yeah, that's a very good question. First of all, I'm very happy that we have nowadays this information available. It used to be maybe a subset of a documentation for some services. Thanks to a lot of these improvements that we've seen, we've had programs like well-architected framework and Cloud Adoption Framework and the Azure Security Benchmark, which are all kind of adjacent to each other. But from my perspective, that's all giving us actual ability to any sort of guidelines to rule. But as you correctly pointed out there, it's kind of overwhelming. Just like we've had CIS benchmarks for a lot of major providers for a long time, but if it was about lack of information, no one will kind of know. I mean, it's just absurd. Like, you can't harden or you can't keep up with all of those benchmarks all the time. So you need some sort of guidance. The secure score and this kind of gamification that Microsoft is putting into Microsoft Defender, for example, that's a good way of getting started. And obviously, as a security person, I'd like everyone to do kind of some threat modeling and have an understanding of the risk of their application, their users, their business, and the overall enterprise security architecture. But especially if you're the only technical person in your whole organization, that's quite a tall order. You really need to do some features as well, and some operations, and so forth and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, thinking towards customers who are new to the cloud, who are just venturing into Azure and are moving away from the on-premises world, you actually spoke about some security potential pitfalls that they follow when they go from on-prem. Like, we all had domain admin on-prem, and you were saying like everybody gets owner or contributor when they join us Azure subscription. Do you think there's much of a mindset change that has to go on that journey from them from on-prem to the cloud, or do you think it's just a little bit of laziness where they're taking bad practices into the cloud world with them? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. Whenever there is a huge leap in technology, you will sort of hope that we will start, because we don't have legacy, we will start building things the right way.
Yep.
But the truth is that it's kind of seen as an excuse to do things kind of faster. It's time to market is a very good value proposition for new technologies, because there aren't any of those controls yet, so you don't need to worry about them. You'll just do your things. Same is true with for example, Kubernetes security right now. It's starting to get a lot of complexity in there. But broadly speaking, with cloud, there is certainly this, cloud skills themselves are still rare. There's a lack of cloud skills, and there's a lack of security skills. And if you want to have an overlap of both of them, that's, as someone who also, sells projects with consultants who have those skills, I'm like, yes, job security is also part of security. Yeah.
Awesome. So thinking about those different teams that we have in an IT department, we'll often have, maybe your IT admins, your developers, your security, database administrators. Do you find that teams outside of that security team take security seriously enough and put enough effort into it? Or do you think that's potentially, like you said, where we need to upskill ourselves and think about it more when we're doing different tasks?
Yeah, that's again an interesting question right there. So, if I'm being honest, there's just so much in the overall security space. If a security consultant, for example, like me, comes in for a quick sprint or for just a half a day, and tells a team of developers that, hey, here's the results of the scan that I ran. You have so much work to do. These are all of the CVs that you need to fix. Or you were supposed to go public, or you were supposed to launch next week, but I'm not giving you my rubber stamp of approval. Go fix this. It's certainly not motivating people to try to look for security specialization. And there is this kind of security as kind of specialization has done a bad job of kind of, first of all, mystifying this, and second of all, kind of it's very much as a kind of seen as a kind of compliance or naysayer type of approach. It's not seen necessarily from a developer's point of view as something that you can improve the quality, or it's not necessarily seen maybe interesting. Even it's kind of one of those non-functional requirements like we used to have with usability, for example, or accessibility. That it's nice when we propose something when we figure there's no budget, but those were the first things to go for a long time as well. It's better now. It's nowhere near as close as it should be, but I kind of wrap them from a functional versus non-functional requirement perspective to the same bucket.
Yep. I think in some of the customer conversations I've had with them, they want to adopt new technology. Let's say containers. I know containers aren't necessarily that new nowadays, but they want to adopt new ways of doing things, but security often holds them back, or that's the perception that they think. How do you find that right balance between adopting the new and going for the innovative technology versus being secure and not having everything open to the world? How do you find the balance for your customers with that?
Yeah, that's the $1,000 question, or whatever the inflation is giving us right now. But absolutely, it's always a balancing act. If you are lucky enough to have a security organization within your team, then you might not have kind of that security person with you from the very start, and the security expertise is something that's quite scarce, and it might be kind of limited to whenever we are purchasing a new system, and it's kind of built in this area where we thought of, hey, now we are purchasing a block of IT. We bought our first ERP or whatever, and that's where we had this kind of security verification programs that just before we knew waterfall method, just before kind of end of the design phase maybe, or just before going to the production, you had kind of security check as you had some of your other tests there as well. And that's where this, you wouldn't want as a developer either to be forced into arbitrary timelines from your perspective, or no ability to change things. Everything's already planned for, and you're just asked to sign this off. And that's not the approach that we should have. And that's why in security jargon, we are talking about shifting security left, which means basically those tools like the Checo security recommendations that I showed you, we can do those centrally. I can run those on my own as a security expert. We can integrate those into CI/CD, or I can even give that opportunity for the developers to get exposed to that already at that phase. And we can customize those rules, and we can kind of tune them closer and closer so that it's not just intrusive. It's not just saying no. As I mentioned in my talk as well, it's any movement towards security improvements is great. It's not black and white. It's very often conveyed as either we are full on security, we have massive security teams, we are maybe regulated because we are maybe a medical device maker or something like that, and that's why we have to do things securely, which means that we have to do things slowly, and that's not really the reality. It's kind of it needs to be a combination, and I believe everyone will benefit from having a little bit of more security mindedness in their team. It doesn't need to be a full security person, but just like you will do user story kind of creation together, or you will do story point poker, then you could very well do a lightweight version of threat modeling on your teams as well.
Yeah, I think it needs to be that constant conversation going on with everybody, and not just invite security in at the very last minute or after you've purchased something and then figure out how to do it. It needs to be that whole collaborative community-like conversation going on nowadays. I think that's key to doing what companies need to do. Thinking about resources for people learning about new things and trying to add additional skills into what they've already got. Carol, I know Microsoft has fantastic resources, and you've obviously got your book as well, but where else would you recommend people go to? Is there Twitter accounts they should follow? Is there sites they should be bookmarking? What are your go-to resources?
That's another fantastic question right there. So there's definitely lots of very active security people in Twitter as well. There's definitely lively discussion. There's just like, for example, cloud native community is very active on Twitter compared to, for example, I don't know, for example, .NET community might be active on different forums. So security community has quite an active and verbose and somewhat open community. I follow myself quite a bit of security experts in there, and like to consume a lot of that content, kind of curated content through that. I create kind of private lists of people that I follow, for example, and if you have lists basically you have multiple feeds, home feeds in Twitter. So it's a great way of curating that type of content. Maybe specifically, I would like to give a shout out for stuff to learn. Will be Tanya Chansa, who used to be or still is the CEO of VHack Purple. That just actually was acquired by another company that I just don't recall. And by that acquisition, they actually made all of their application security content free, actually. So there's ton of video courses that you can check from their environment, and just generally following Tanya on Twitter is a good idea to kind of get a little bit of more visibility to security.
Brilliant. So one last question, Carol, for you today. If there was one thing you could change around security in Azure, what would you wish to be?
Security in Azure, yeah. I guess there isn't a good answer that will satisfy my need for change and kind of be interesting enough for everyone as such here, but maybe that one bit that I would like to change is this kind of not specific to Azure, but overall this kind of asymmetry of this cloud security expertise, interest, skills, and people versus where it's all needed. So basically, it's There's a teeny tiny amount of people who know enough to be helpful, and a lot of people who actively don't want to know and might do some damage. Of course, there's a ton of people in between, but shifting that balance, getting more security interest into that bigger part of cloud people, because we have a lot of cloud people growing right now. We have a lot of cloud skills programs. There's some cyber programs from Microsoft now as well, and it's starting to get a pace on. But certainly, kind of within that existing community, I like to get a little bit more exposure there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carol. For the audience, if they want to follow you or see you speak at another event, what have you got coming up, or where can they find you on Twitter?
The screen name that I have here is also my Twitter handle. I have a few sessions coming up that I know in person. I'm going to dev in Sweden in a couple of weeks. Then there's IgluConf in Finland. It used to be a conference in person in January in Finland. Now it's close to midsummer in Finland, also very nice. And then there's KCDC coming up as well. It's a lovely conference. It actually was actually last year my opener for post-COVID in-person conferences. I'm very, very happy for that as well.
Brilliant. Sounds really good. Thank you so much for your time today, Carol. Thank you for your session. It was really insightful. Definitely taught me a few things because I didn't realise you could do IP address filtering on the storage access or the SaaS tokens. So I've learned something new today. So amazing for that. Also, thank you so much to our previous guests, to Gregor and to Shabazz and to Wim for giving up their time. It was great to have you on and have that chat. When we look towards other events, because Global Azure event is not just today, it's running for 3 days, so we still have a few more days left of the community sessions. Tomorrow on this live stream, wherever you're watching, we will be joined by Magnus, and he'll be hosting the show. He's got a few people to speak to, so he's got Dan from Confluent, and he'll be chatting about the various different services that Azure has. He'll also have Tim Huckabee, and he'll be talking about ethics of AI. So lots of things to come. If you're looking for other sessions, though, please do check out our website. We have, like I said, about 438 sessions at last count going on over the next few days. So be sure to get involved, speak to the community, say hello, and we hope to see you at more events and in the future as well. Thank you for tuning in today, folks. Really do appreciate it.